It waits in the shadows of clay and stone, a voice pressed into the earth before the first temples rose, before the first kings crowned themselves with divinity and declared their right to rule. It is older than the names we give to gods, older than the boundaries we draw between good and evil. In those forgotten centuries, the air itself was an archive, carrying the smoke of fires that burned not only for warmth, but to etch stories into memory long before the idea of writing was born. What little has survived the crossing into our age arrives in fragments, stripped of its full weight, drained of the pulse it once carried. You've been told that the Sumerian instructions of Shuruppak are among the earliest teachings humanity has ever recorded, a father's counsel to his son, chiseled with authority, preserved almost entirely intact. You've been shown the maxims of Tahotep, Egypt's graceful commandments of order, restraint, and patience, their structure precise, their language refined, as though each line had been polished by centuries of thought. But a first story should not be this perfect. True beginnings are jagged, unsteady, uncertain in their shape. These are not the first voices. These are the approved voices. If you lean close to the gaps, if you listen to the silences between the surviving lines, you begin to sense the shape of something larger, a body of thought that existed before these texts, perhaps centuries before, passed from mouth to mouth in dim firelight. These were not just moral tales. Some may have been instructions, warnings, codes that carried more than guidance. They may have contained something that could not be safely written. Something that, once fixed into clay or papyrus, would not be easily controlled. Buried deep in the digital corners of archive.org are scans of broken tablets, dark photographs of cracked stone etched with looping, repetitive marks. The official label says, Scribal Practice, the exercises of apprentices learning to write. But there is something odd in their rhythm. Certain shapes appear again and again at intervals too precise to be accidental. Some researchers see in them the skeleton of longer phrases, the same fragments repeated as if the scribe was not practicing, but copying. Copying something they could not fully translate, something they may have been ordered to record only in pieces, leaving the rest to fall away. And in every case, there is a missing figure, the translator, the compiler, the nameless intermediary who decided what survived and what vanished. Their names do not appear on the tablets. Their fingerprints are nowhere in the margins. They exist only in the negative space, in the lines that do not match, in the words that seem to trail into silence, in the sudden shift from raw thought to carefully balanced sentence. They are the ones who took a living voice and made it tame. This is the pattern. The first voice is always interrupted. It rises from the ground in half-sentences and strange symbols, only to be cut, refined, rewritten in a tongue meant for public ears. It is made polite. It is made safe. It is made to sound like wisdom, but wisdom that cannot harm the structures that guard it. The result is what you have always been given, a library of echoes. The teachings you memorized as ancient and sacred were born already altered. The oldest words you know are not the first words that were spoken. And if that first voice were to speak again, unbroken, unfiltered, there is no telling what it would undo. There are wounds in every sacred text, scars hidden between the lines where something once lived. You can feel them if you read slowly enough. The sudden change in tone in the Book of Job, where lament becomes polished doctrine in the space of a breath. The missing stanzas in Ecclesiastes that once bridged despair and acceptance, now torn away, leaving a gap that feels less like an accident and more like a door slammed shut. Proverbs 2, stitched together from mismatched cloth, its rhythm breaking in ways that betray an absent hand. The erasures are never random. Each gap, each abrupt ending, each verse cut mid-thought forms a shape in the silence, a shadow of what was removed. In FOIA logs, buried under the sterile language of cultural preservation, there are quiet records of government teams acquiring rare papyri from private collections, manuscripts taken not to museums but to facilities with no public access. The trail ends there. You will not see them again. In the desert, under heat and silence, there are whispers of unearthed scrolls pulled from the sand by archaeologists whose names never appear in the final reports. Online, brief bursts of panic, Reddit threads that flare with photos of brittle parchment, stamped seals, strange marginal notes, vanish hours later, scrubbed clean. Those who saw them speak in fragments. Armed men in unmarked vehicles, evidence packed into black cases, the dig sites abandoned overnight. What could a verse say that would unsettle both throne and temple? What combination of words would be so dangerous that kings and priests, sworn enemies in every other matter, would stand side by side to keep them from you? This is not just theft. This is grief, heavy and ancient, grief for something that once belonged to all of us, that might have shown us who we are, and that was taken so completely that we can only mourn the hole it left behind. Some believe wisdom was never a gift for the many. It was not meant to comfort the farmer in his field or the mother at her hearth. It was meant to test the few who could hear it and still see beyond the words. The rest would be lulled by the surface meaning, never sensing the deeper machinery beneath. The proverbs, the maxims, the parables, these were camouflage, a cloak drawn over something precise and deliberate. The repetition in the Sumerian lines, the mirrored phrasing in Proverbs, the rhythm of the Egyptian Sebate, they are too measured to be accidental. What looks like poetry might instead be an ancient encryption system, hiding instructions in plain sight. You can see it when you stop reading for meaning and start counting. Syllables, word intervals, repetitions at regular distances, like the tick of a clock buried inside the text. To modern eyes, these patterns vanish into the background. But the few who obsess over them, the ones who call themselves cipher hunters in late-night forums and locked Discord channels, claim they align with more than language. Some sequences match the timing of eclipses, equinoxes, and planetary conjunctions. Others appear to shadow human events, the rise and fall of kings, the start of wars, the signing of treaties. One whistleblower, in an X/Twitter thread that disappeared within a day, wrote that these cycles were not symbolic at all. They were functional. Behavioral resets, he called them, keys that could be turned only when certain celestial alignments made the human mind more susceptible. He claimed the ancients knew these windows, timed their delivery of wisdom accordingly, and could shift the thinking of entire cities with a single verse spoken at the right moment. If you believe him, the so-called wisdom literature of the ancient world was not passive knowledge. It was an operating system. The repetition and structure were not for beauty, they were for resonance, the way a tuning fork hums at a specific pitch until another nearby object begins to hum with it. A mind could be made to hum without knowing why. A people could be nudged toward obedience or revolt without feeling the hand that pushed them. And what happened to this code? Official history says it was lost, stripped of meaning by centuries of copying and translation. But look around. In your feeds, in your podcasts, in the videos you scroll past in the middle of the night, you hear it still, reshaped as life hacks, rules for success, motivational mantras. Their delivery is rapid, repetitive, rhythmic. They tell you how to wake up earlier, how to think more clearly, how to achieve more, how to live your best life. Yet these messages are strangely uniform, strangely interchangeable. Their form is ancient. Their content is safe. The trigger has been hollowed out, leaving only the shell. But a hollow shell can still serve as a container. And if the original signal was ever put back inside, if the true words, the activating sequence, were spoken again, no one would notice until the change had already begun. That is the fear. That is the suspicion. You might already be living inside a later generation of this code, repeating phrases that did not originate in your own mind, shaping your behavior in ways you believe are self-chosen. We comfort ourselves by thinking that programming is something done to machines, not to people. But programming only works if the subject doesn't see the code. And if wisdom was the first code, then none of us have ever been free of it. Some stories do not guide, they bind. You carry them as if they were maps, but every turn leads you back to the same silent square, the same unanswered question. The Book of Job does not resolve his suffering. It circles it, sanctifies it, stretches it across pages until the reader learns to live inside the not knowing. In the Babylonian laments, grief is performed in precise, repeated steps, wailing, silence, offering, silence, until the ritual itself becomes the resolution. The ending is not freedom, but acceptance of the cage. Psychologists would call it learned helplessness. the state where repeated, unresolved struggle erodes the will to act. The ancients seemed to know this. Whether by design or instinct, they wove this paralysis into narrative form. A well-crafted parable without a true ending lingers like an open loop in the mind, drawing thought back to it again and again, never allowing the door to close. And while the mind circles, it does not wander elsewhere. The modern version is more subtle. You see it in the endless carousel of online wisdom quotes, beautiful, resonant, but offering no action, no resolution. They arrive in your feed daily, dressed in soft colors, wrapped around a stranger's photograph of a mountain or an ocean. You read, you nod, you save the post, and nothing changes. Tomorrow, another appears. And the cycle is the point. In the courts of kings, there was an entire genre for this, Mirror for Princes literature. On the surface, it was guidance for rulers. Be patient, value your people. In truth, it was a leash. By defining the shape of virtue, it set the boundaries of thought. It taught rulers how to see themselves, which is another way of teaching them how to obey. The realization comes slow, like light seeping into a locked room. Perhaps the comfort in these stories is not a gift but the soft lining of the trap. You read them because they calm you, but calm is the currency of control. The cage you cannot see is the cage you will never try to leave. Sometimes what was buried refuses to stay quiet. It seeps back through the cracks, not as whole texts, but as splinters lodged in the edges of your waking life. A dream that feels older than your own memory. A page in a book you can't recall buying, covered in handwriting that matches no one you know. A voice in a crowded room that seems to speak your thoughts before you form them. You turn and they are gone. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are fragments with no theological anchor, short, riddle-like verses whose meanings resist translation. The Nag Hammadi texts hold similar intrusions, lines that feel misplaced, as though they belonged to a different scripture entirely. They are rarely mentioned in public lectures, glossed over in footnotes, dismissed as scribal confusion. Yet their cadence is familiar, almost too familiar, as if it's not the first time you've heard them. In the shadowed corners of the internet, PDFs circulate of uncatalogued tablets, grainy photographs, faint lines carved into clay. They appear on obscure forums or locked Telegram channels, shared with no context, only to vanish hours later. The deletions are too fast, too precise to be random. Some think they are accidental leaks, but others suspect the opposite, deliberate breaches in the containment. Someone, somewhere, is letting the first voice slip through again. And then there was the night it happened in the open. A wisdom story, posted to multiple platforms, in multiple languages, all at once. Every version identical, every word matching across alphabets and cultures. No account claimed it. No metadata survived. 24 hours later, every post was gone. Not just deleted, but erased as if they had never existed. Those who read it remember the sensation less than the words themselves. A strange pull in the mind, like a memory waking up. If the first voice is speaking again, it will not be allowed to speak for long. Whoever kept it buried for centuries has not gone away. They are listening. They are watching. And if you hear it, truly hear it, someone will come for you.